This is a serious day in the parliamentary calendar. It is a day when the Prime Minister of the land sets out his vision for the country. And I think Speaker Lockwood Smith made a good point when he said at the beginning of Mr Key's speech that many New Zealanders were waiting to hear the speech. I'd go further. I'd say there are at least 168,000 New Zealanders who may well, as we speak today, be hanging on every word of Mr Key's speech. They, of course, are the 168,000 New Zealanders who do not have a job, who may well at 2 o'clock have tuned into this Parliament hoping to hear a vision, hoping to hear a plan, hoping to hear some idea, some solution that would alleviate their personal and family turmoil that those 168,000 New Zealanders go through every day because they do not have the dignity of work. So I suspect both the Speaker and others are right. There are 168,000 people out there without a job today who hoped, and whose hopes have been sadly dashed, that this Prime Minister would actually provide a vision and a plan. Now, what we had from the speech, of course, apart from, and other colleagues have touched on it, I will not, a whole host of re-announcements and re-announcements, the infamous Kopu Bridge, the 11th time it's been announced, re-announcements about youth guarantees when Kate Wilkinson sat with me on Canterbury television not a week ago as the Labor Minister and was asked, when are we going to get the youth guarantee? And effectively she said she couldn't guarantee the youth guarantee that she guaranteed before the election, but a re-announcement of that. You see, the National Party talks about economic growth, and they are right to do so. Every MP in this Parliament wants greater economic growth. But economic growth in itself, of course, is a means to an end. And everybody wants economic growth because it is a means to an end. But the key point is, what is the end? What is the vision? What do we as a Parliament, or what did this Prime Minister articulate, what he wanted New Zealand and New Zealanders to look like once we achieved, if we achieved, although Dr Bollard has made some comments about that, if we achieved what we all want, and that is economic growth to the levels where we can help those 168,000 New Zealanders. And the end is about a vision. The end is about saying what sort of country we want. And the only thing we heard from the Prime Minister was a rehash of the pre-election slogan, "I'm ambitious for New Zealand." Well, I'm sure he is. I suspect we all are, in our own way, with our own definition of what that means. But what I would like, Mr Speaker, is I would have liked the Prime Minister to have got up, as would the 168,000 unemployed New Zealanders, and I would have liked him to articulate what being ambitious for New Zealand means. Does it mean that you've got a plan to train people? Because in that speech all we heard was about job ops and job max, which take 5,000 of the 43,000+ unemployed, is it 16 to 24-year-olds, give them at the minimum wage for 6 months, doing something, not actually gaining skills and proper skill training like apprenticeships. When we left office, 14,000 people in trade training. Give them 6 months' work, get them off the books, try and hoodwink people and say they're not unemployed, we're doing something with them. And then at the end of the 6 months, that's a means, what's the end? And the end is at the end of the 6 months there's no job there, and the employer might employ them, but do they have a skill? Are they closer to an apprenticeship? Are they closer to a piece of paper with a qualification that'll lift them out of the situation they're in? Are they incentivised to go to training, any training? No, they're not. It's a fiction. It is a fiction. Here's what Phil O'Reilly, my leader, quoted from, but here's what Phil O'Reilly said about the scheme on Catherine Ryan's show last week when Catherine made reference to the scheme subsidising employers, 5,000 on wages paid in 6 months. Has that been successful? Was it logical? Mr O'Reilly said this, and he's the head of Business New Zealand. He said the problem with these types of programs is often, if you make them too big, they turn into a bit of make work, really. That's the problem. So you get into it, you know, literally digging holes and filling them in again effectively. And it was Mr O'Reilly who pointed out a very interesting thing, that he disagrees with the government slapping the cap on the polytechs and the universities at a time when young people especially are trying to get into these institutions for training. He made the point we should be opening up especially our polytechs and pumping those 43,000 young people who are on the scrap heap, not to just, go to work for 8 hours a day to do something, anything, but to actually bring them closer to a viable qualification. So when they finish their course, and the economy does ramp up, as Mr O'Reilly said, then we won't get into the situation we were before the Labor government took office, where there was a massive skill gap and there were not people of skill, who were trained and skilled and work ready, not just can get up in the morning, breathe, walk and go through the door, but actually do have the skills to contribute to a business. Plumbers, electricians, my deputy leader says, carpenters, all people that we trained, where we said young people will be in training or in school, and 14,000 people engaged in trade training. That's an end. That is a means to an end. That is a means of creating economic growth and providing businesses with viable and highly skilled New Zealanders and giving them the dignity of work and reducing that 168,000 number of unemployed. But was there any... That's ambitious for New Zealand. I'd argue that's really ambitious for New Zealand. But was there any mention, sir, in that speech of a vision about training? What are we going to do with those 168,000 Kiwis who go through a living turmoil? 12, 15 months ago, of course, unemployment was down, training was up, people were in training. Maori unemployment, I think the lowest in our history under the previous government, and people had options to train, to go to Polytech, to go to university. And to use an excuse, but it is a fact, that the odd student might drink too many beers over the 3 years and waste their time, and we all know one. We all went to university or Polytech with one. There's always one around in society. To use that as an excuse to say, right, we're going to start carving up, restricting tertiary level education when other countries in the world, of course, are seeing that as the key to unlock the handcuffs of economic degradation, I think is short-sighted. These people, this speech will go down in history as the first step to economic archaeology, because there was no skills training in here. There were fluffy words about R&D and innovation. Well, if they were serious about R&D and innovation, they wouldn't have canned what the Canterbury Manufacturers Association wanted. Amy Adams knows that because she took a barrel from them before the election about Mr Key's back down on it. What other manufacturers, science and other sectors wanted, which was money for innovation and training. They cut it, they got rid of it. They made that choice. I don't see that as being ambitious for New Zealand. I don't see a plan. I don't see a vision. He says it's a joke, that member does. Well, I invite him to go to the 168,000 Kiwis and tell them that their situation, Mr Coleman, is a joke. I know of parents in my electorate, who have, because there is no training happening now, have gone to mechanics, to carpenters, to businesses like that and said, look, we've taken out a second mortgage. We'll pay you to train our son or our daughter. We'll pay you. For God's sake, get them out of a hole, train them. We will pay you. Here's the cheque up front now, because, of course, the government's pulled the pin. So I just asked the National Party to define for us what ambitious for New Zealand means. I asked them to define for us, once we sort of wander down this great economic growth a path that seems to be encumbered by a cycleway, because that seems to be the plan, a cycleway and a job summit, a talk fest, and 5,000 young people who have a job doing something for 6 months, as Mr O'Reilly talks about filling in holes again. I asked them to define what they want out of economic growth and what New Zealand should look like. I asked them to define what they mean by being ambitious for New Zealand, because today, Mr Speaker, Mr Key over-egged the pudding. He overhyped it. New Zealanders know it. This was going to be the big bang, to use the scientific term. Big Tuesday. We were hanging on every word. Well, it hasn't been, and the shameful thing, as that member giggles over there, the shameful thing, of course, is after the speech, what has changed for 168,000 unemployed Kiwis? Nothing. And what will change in the future as they lament their circumstances? They're not bludgers. They're not lazy people. Many are middle class who've never been unemployed in their life, and they find a situation that is an anathema to them, and they are in a hole, they want to get out of it, and they look to this government to provide it. And this speech, sir, provided them with nothing. It was hollow, it was shallow, it was nothing.